The sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Willow Creek as Olivia Anderson stepped down from the stagecoach, her trembling fingers clutching a crumpled letter to her chest, the promise of a new life that had carried her across 2,000 miles of American wilderness, only to end in heartbreak before it had even begun. Olivia had traveled all the way from Boston to the Wyoming Territory in the spring of 1878, answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride. At 22, she had few prospects back east after her parents died of influenza, leaving her with mounting debts and a small dress shop she couldn't maintain. The promise of marriage to a successful rancher named Edgar Thornton had seemed like providence until he'd taken one look at her face and declared their arrangement null and void. "You didn't mention those." "Marks in your letters," Edgar had said, his lip curling in disgust as he pointed at her face. "I can't have a wife looking like that. What would people think?" Those marks were the constellation of freckles that dusted Olivia's fair skin, spreading across her nose and cheeks like cinnamon scattered on cream. They had been the bane of her existence since childhood, when other girls had taunted her mercilessly. Her mother had always told her they were angel kisses, but Edgar Thornton saw them as a flaw that made her unworthy. Now she stood alone on the wooden boardwalk, her trunk beside her, as the stagecoach pulled away in a cloud of dust. The driver had been kind enough to return half her fare, but that wouldn't get her back to Boston, and she had nowhere to go. The small town of Willow Creek stretched before her, a single main street lined with wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and various other establishments. Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow despite the late spring warmth. "Miss, you look a mite lost." The voice came from behind her, deep and gentle. Olivia turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with broad shoulders and kind eyes the color of whiskey. His face was tanned from the sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. Dark hair curled from beneath a well-worn Stetson, and a star-shaped badge gleamed on his vest. Olivia swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I suppose I am lost, sir. Name's Lucas Quinn. I'm the sheriff here in Willow Creek." He tipped his hat politely. "Couldn't help but notice you've been standing here looking troubled since the stage pulled out." Olivia blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of this stranger. "I'm Olivia Anderson. I was supposed to marry Mr. Edgar Thornton, but there's been a change of plans." Sheriff Quinn's expression darkened. "Thornton backed out, did he? Can't say I'm surprised. Man's got a reputation for being particular." His gaze swept over her face, lingering on her freckles, but without the revulsion she had come to expect. "Let me guess, he took exception to those stars on your face." "Stars," Olivia echoed, confused. "Those freckles." Lucas smiled, the warmth reaching his eyes. "My ma used to say freckles were where the sun had kissed someone it found particularly beautiful. Me, I always thought they looked like stars, a whole constellation right there on your face. Every freckle is a star to me." For the first time since arriving in Willow Creek, Olivia felt a warmth bloom in her chest. She ducked her head, unused to compliments about the very feature that had caused her so much grief. "That's very kind of you, Sheriff Quinn, but Mr. Thornton did not share your poetic view. He's refused to honor our arrangement, and I find myself stranded." Lucas frowned. "That ain't right. You came all this way on his invitation." He looked around the street, then back at Olivia. "You got any family to go back to?" "No," she admitted. "My parents passed last year. I sold everything to make this journey." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "Well, Miss Anderson, Willow Creek may not be what you expected, but we're not in the habit of leaving folks stranded. Mrs. Hawkins over at the boarding house always has a room available, and I happen to know Miss Clara at the general store is looking for help." "I couldn't impose. It's not imposing," Lucas interrupted gently. "It's neighbors helping neighbors. That's how we survive out here in the territories." Olivia hesitated, looking down the dusty street toward the stagecoach station, where the next eastbound coach wouldn't arrive for at least a week. "I suppose I could stay until I figure out what to do next," she conceded. Lucas smiled, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. "That's the spirit. Now let me help you with that trunk." Before she could protest, he'd lifted her heavy trunk as if it weighed nothing and started down the boardwalk. Mrs. Hawkins runs a respectable establishment, no rowdy cowboys or card games, just clean rooms and decent meals. You'll be comfortable there while you get your bearings. Olivia hurried to keep up with his long strides. You're very kind, Sheriff Quinn. Lucas, he corrected. Everyone just calls me Lucas, except when they're in trouble. Am I in trouble? She asked, a hint of a smile touching her lips. He glanced down at her, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Not with me, Miss Anderson. Not with me. The boarding house was a 2-story white clapboard building with green shutters and a wide front porch adorned with rocking chairs. Flower boxes beneath the windows spilled over with bright blooms, bringing color to the otherwise dusty landscape. Mrs. Hawkins proved to be a plump, motherly woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that softened as soon as Lucas explained Olivia's situation. That Edgar Thornton, she exclaimed, hands on her hips. Cold as a rattlesnake's heart, that one. Well, don't you worry, dear, we'll get you settled right in. Olivia found herself ushered into a small but clean room on the second floor with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the distant mountains. Mrs. Hawkins fussed about, providing fresh linens and explaining the house rules. Breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 6 in the evening. No gentlemen callers in your room, of course. The bath is at the end of the hall, hot water on Saturdays or by special arrangement for an extra fee. Olivia nodded, trying to absorb all the information while still processing the sudden change in her circumstances. Thank you, Mrs. Hawkins. I'm not sure how long I'll be staying. I need to find work to pay for my room and save for passage back east. Sheriff already mentioned you might help out at the general store, Mrs. Hawkins said. Clara Williams is a good woman, fair employer. Lost her husband in the war, runs that store better than he ever did, if you ask me. After Mrs. Hawkins left, Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed and finally allowed the tears to come. She cried for her broken dreams, for the humiliation of being rejected, for the uncertainty of her future. But when the tears dried, she found herself standing straighter, a new determination settling into her bones. She wasn't the first woman to face adversity, and she wouldn't be the last. She would make the best of this situation, work hard, save her money, and return to Boston with her head held high. Or perhaps find another path entirely. Either way, she would not allow Edgar Thornton's cruel dismissal to define her worth. The next morning, Olivia rose with the sun, dressed in her plainest dress, and pinned her copper hair into a neat bun. After a hearty breakfast of flapjacks and bacon, she made her way to the general store, determined to secure employment. Clara Williams was sorting through a shipment of fabric when Olivia entered, the bell above the door announcing her arrival. The proprietress was a handsome woman in her 40s, with intelligent eyes and a businesslike manner. You must be Miss Anderson, she said, setting aside a bolt of calico. Sheriff Quinn mentioned you might be looking for work. Yes, madam, Olivia replied. I'm a hard worker and I have experience running a small dress shop in Boston. Clara's eyebrows rose. A dressmaker, are you? That's a useful skill around these parts. Most women order their finery from catalogs, but alterations are always needed. I can sew anything from everyday wear to wedding gowns, Olivia said with quiet confidence. I can also keep books, serve customers, and arrange displays. Clara studied her for a long moment, then nodded briskly. I'll start you at $3 a week plus meals. You prove yourself useful, we can discuss a raise. Store opens at 7, closes at 6, half day on Sundays. Thank you, Mrs. Williams, I won't disappoint you. Clara, please, and I should warn you this town's full of gossip about you already. Mail order bride rejected by Edgar Thornton. Some folks might be unkind. Olivia lifted her chin. I'm no stranger to unkindness, Clara. I'll manage. Good. I like a woman with backbone. Clara handed her an apron. Now, let's start by organizing that new shipment of yard goods. The work was straightforward, and Olivia found comfort in the familiar tasks. The store saw a steady stream of customers throughout the day, many of whom made thinly veiled excuses to get a look at Thornton's rejected bride. Olivia met their curious stares with dignity, answering questions politely but firmly deflecting intrusive inquiries. By mid-afternoon, her cheeks ached from maintaining a pleasant expression, and her spirits had begun to flag under the constant scrutiny. Just as she was rearranging a display of canned goods, the bell above the door jingled and Sheriff Quinn strode in, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. "Afternoon, Clara," he called, then his eyes found Olivia. "Miss Anderson, how are you settling in?" "Quite well, thank you," Olivia replied, conscious of the curious glances from the two women examining fabric nearby. Lucas approached, lowering his voice. "Thought I'd check in. Town this size, news travels fast. Wanted to make sure no one was giving you trouble." "Nothing I can't handle," she assured him, touched by his concern. "Miss Anderson has been exemplary," Clara added, joining them. "Already suggested reorganizing the fabric section by color and type instead of just piling it all together. Going to bring in more business from the ladies, I suspect." Lucas smiled, glad to hear it. He turned back to Olivia. "I was wondering if you might join me for supper at the hotel dining room tonight. Figure you could use a friendly face after your first day." Olivia hesitated, aware of the potential for gossip. "That's very kind, but purely neighborly," Lucas added quickly. "As the sheriff, it's my duty to make sure new arrivals feel welcome." Clara snorted softly. "Go on, Olivia. The hotel serves the best food in town on Tuesdays, beef stew that'll make you forget all your troubles." "Well, in that case," Olivia relented with a small smile, "I accept your neighborly invitation, Sheriff. 6:30, he suggested. "I can call for you at the boarding house." 6:30, she agreed. After Lucas left, Clara gave Olivia a knowing look. "Sheriff's never invited me to dinner in all the years I've lived here." "He's just being kind," Olivia protested. "Lucas Quinn is kind to everyone," Clara agreed, "but he doesn't look at everyone the way he looks at you." Olivia busied herself with straightening a stack of handkerchiefs, hoping Clara wouldn't notice the blush creeping up her neck. "I'm hardly in a position to think about such things. I've only just arrived, and under less than ideal circumstances." "Sometimes the best things happen when our plans fall apart," Clara said sagely. "My Henry died at Gettysburg, thought my life was over. Now I run the most successful store in the county. Never would have happened if things had gone according to plan." At precisely 6:30 that evening, Lucas Quinn arrived at Mrs. Hawkins' boarding house. He'd exchanged his dusty work clothes for clean trousers, a pressed shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His dark hair was still damp from washing, and he'd clearly taken a razor to his jawline. Mrs. Hawkins ushered him into the parlor, her eyes twinkling with undisguised interest. "My, don't you clean up nice, Sheriff. I'll just fetch Miss Anderson." Moments later, Olivia descended the stairs. She'd changed into her second-best dress, a deep blue that brought out the auburn highlights in her hair and made her eyes seem even more green. She'd pinned her hair more softly around her face, and the lamplight caught the golden constellation of freckles across her cheeks. Lucas stood transfixed, hat in hand. "Miss Anderson, you look like a vision." "Thank you," she said softly, "and please call me Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, as if tasting the name. "Shall we?" The hotel dining room was moderately busy, but Lucas had reserved a table by the window, away from the most curious onlookers. As they settled in, Olivia couldn't help noticing the glances thrown their way. "Is it always like this?" she asked quietly. "Everyone watching?" Lucas grimaced apologetically. "Small town, not much excitement. It'll die down once the next bit of gossip comes along." The waiter brought them the promised beef stew, along with fresh bread and butter. As they ate, Lucas asked about her first day, and Olivia found herself relaxing as she described the work at the general store. "Clara seems to value your input," he observed. "That's rare. She usually thinks she knows best about everything." "She's been very kind," Olivia said. "More than I expected, given the circumstances." Clara's got a good heart beneath that businesslike exterior. Lucas broke off a piece of bread. "So you had a dress shop in Boston," Olivia nodded. "It was my mother's, nothing grand, but we made a decent living before she and my father fell ill. After they passed, I couldn't keep up with the rent and the suppliers on my own." "I'm sorry for your loss," Lucas said, his eyes gentle. "Losing parents is hard, no matter your age. You speak from experience. Pa died when I was 16. Ma followed 3 years later." Left me and my younger brother to fend for ourselves. You have a brother? Olivia asked, eager to learn more about him. Owen, he's a doctor in Denver now. Pride warmed Lucas's voice. Worked 3 jobs to put him through medical school. Best decision I ever made. That was very generous of you. He's family. You do what you must for family. Lucas took a sip of coffee. What about you? Any siblings? No, just me. My mother had several miscarriages before and after I was born. Must have made it harder, being alone when they passed. Olivia nodded, the familiar ache of grief rising in her chest. That's partly why I answered Mr. Thornton's advertisement, the idea of starting fresh, having a family of my own. She trailed off, embarrassed by her candor. Nothing wrong with wanting that, Lucas said quietly. Most folks do. Yes, well, Olivia smoothed her napkin on her lap. It seems my Freckles had other plans. Lucas leaned forward, his expression serious. Thornton's a fool, Olivia. Those freckles are beautiful. They make you unique, special. You're kind to say so. It's not kindness, it's truth. His gaze was intense, unwavering. Every freckle is a star to me, a map of constellations I could study for a lifetime. Olivia's breath caught in her throat at the sincerity in his voice. No one had ever spoken about her freckles that way, as if they were something precious rather than a flaw to be hidden. You have quite a way with words for a sheriff, she managed at last. He chuckled, the tension breaking. Don't let it get around, might ruin my reputation with the outlaws. As they finished their meal and stepped out into the cool evening air, Lucas offered his arm. Olivia hesitated only briefly before slipping her hand through it, feeling the solid strength of him beside her. Thank you for dinner, she said as they walked slowly toward the boarding house. It was a welcome respite after a rather overwhelming day. My pleasure. Lucas glanced down at her. I hope it won't be the last time. I'd like that, Olivia admitted, surprising herself with her forthrightness. When they reached Mrs. Hawkins' front porch, Lucas turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. Olivia, I want you to know something. This town can be rough around the edges, but there are good people here. If anyone gives you trouble, you come to me. Understand? I can take care of myself, she said, though she was touched by his protectiveness. I don't doubt that for a second, but everyone needs allies in a new place. He took her hand, the touch sending a surprising warmth up her arm. I'd like to be yours if you'll let me. In the soft glow of the porch lamp, his eyes were earnest and kind. Olivia found herself nodding. I'd like that too, Lucas, thank you, he smiled, squeezing her hand once before releasing it. Good night, Olivia, sweet dreams. Good night, Sheriff, she replied, a smile playing at her lips as she slipped inside, her heart lighter than it had been in months. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Olivia worked diligently at the general store, quickly proving her worth to Clara. Word of her dressmaking skills spread through town, and soon she was taking in additional work, altering dresses and creating custom garments for the local women. The extra income allowed her to begin setting aside money for her uncertain future. Lucas made a habit of stopping by the store almost daily, sometimes just for a moment to tip his hat and inquire after her welfare, other times lingering to chat when business was slow. Twice more he escorted her to dinner, and on Sundays, they often walked together after church, strolling along the creek that gave the town its name. Through these conversations, Olivia learned that Lucas had come to Willow Creek 5 years earlier, taking the job as sheriff after the previous lawman was killed in a robbery. He'd fought briefly in the latter days of the Civil War, too young to see much action but old enough to understand the cost. He loved poetry, but hid his small collection of books from most of the townspeople, believing it might undermine his authority. In turn, she told him about growing up in Boston, about her dreams of someday owning a proper dress shop again, about her love of stargazing that her father had instilled in her. Maybe that's why I like your freckles so much, Lucas had said one evening as they sat on a bench outside the church. They remind me of the night sky. Despite these growing moments of closeness, Olivia was careful to maintain a proper distance. Her experience with Edgar Thornton had left her wary, and the gossip in town hadn't entirely died down. Some, like Mrs. Hawkins and Clara, seemed to delight in the attention Lucas showed her. Others, particularly those who had hoped to match the handsome sheriff with their own daughters or sisters, were less enthusiastic. Among the latter was Veronica Palmer, the banker's daughter. Tall, blonde, and entirely freckle-free, Veronica made no secret of her interest in Lucas or her disdain for Olivia. One afternoon in late June, Veronica entered the general store while Olivia was alone, Clara having gone to the post office to collect a package. "I need 3 yards of that blue ribbon," Veronica announced without preamble, pointing to a spool behind the counter. "Of course, Miss Palmer," Olivia replied politely, reaching for the ribbon. "This is lovely. Are you trimming a new dress?" "It's for the Founders' Day celebration next month," Veronica said, watching as Olivia measured the ribbon. "I'm on the planning committee with Sheriff Quinn." Olivia kept her expression neutral. "How nice. Yes, we'll be spending quite a lot of time together." Veronica examined her gloved hands. "Lucas and I have known each other for years, you know. Our families are quite close." "Is that so?" Olivia began wrapping the ribbon in paper. "Indeed, before you arrived, we were often partners at social gatherings." Veronica leaned across the counter, lowering her voice confidentially. "I think it's admirable how he's taken you under his wing, like a charitable project. Lucas has always had a soft heart for strays." Olivia's hands stilled on the package. "I see." "Oh, I didn't mean to offend," Veronica said, not sounding sorry in the least. "It's just that everyone knows this is temporary. You'll move on eventually back east where you belong. Lucas is merely being kind while you're here." Olivia tied the package with string, fighting to keep her hands steady. "That will be 15 cents, Miss Palmer." Veronica placed the coins on the counter. "He asked me to accompany him to the Founders' Day dance, you know, as his official partner for the committee." This was news to Olivia, and it stung more than she wanted to admit. Lucas hadn't mentioned any dance or committee or partnership with Veronica Palmer. "I'm sure you'll make a lovely couple," she said evenly, handing over the package. Veronica took the ribbon with a triumphant smile. "I just thought you should know to avoid any misunderstandings." After Veronica left, Olivia busied herself with rearranging items on the shelves, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. She had no claim on Lucas Quinn's time or attention. Their friendship, for that, was all it had been, a balm during a difficult time, but perhaps Veronica was right. Perhaps it was merely kindness on his part, a temporary arrangement until Olivia moved on. That evening, when Lucas stopped by the store near closing time, Olivia was more reserved than usual. "Everything all right?" he asked, concern furrowing his brow. "Perfectly fine," she assured him, focusing on balancing the day's receipts. "Just tired." "I thought we might walk by the creek after supper," he suggested. "The fireflies are out in force this week." "Perhaps another time," Olivia said, not meeting his eyes. "I've taken on an alteration job for Mrs. Peterson that I should finish tonight." Lucas studied her for a moment. "Did something happen today?" "Nothing of consequence." Olivia finally looked up, forcing a smile. "Miss Palmer mentioned you're working together on the Founders' Day committee." "It sounds like an important event." Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes. "Ah, and what else did Miss Palmer share?" "Just that you'd asked her to accompany you to the dance, as your official partner." Olivia returned to the ledger. "It's none of my business, of course." "Olivia." Lucas's voice was gentle but firm. "Look at me, please." Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. "Veronica Palmer has been trying to secure my attention since I became sheriff. The town council appointed us both to the committee, along with 3 other people. I did not ask her to accompany me to the dance." "Oh." Olivia felt a flush of embarrassment. "I see. In fact," Lucas continued, a smile tugging at his lips, "I was planning to ask someone else, someone with the most beautiful constellation of freckles I've ever seen." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "Lucas, I understand if you're not interested," he said quickly, "but I'd be honored if you'd consider attending the Founders' Day dance with me, Miss Anderson, as my guest, not my charitable project." "She told you that?" Olivia winced. "Clara overheard and mentioned it. She was rather incensed on your behalf." Lucas reached across the counter to take her hand. "Olivia, my interest in you has nothing to do with charity. Surely you know that by now." The warmth of his hand around hers sent a pleasant shiver up her arm. "I'd like to believe that, then believe it." His thumb traced small circles on her palm. "Say you'll come to the dance with me." Looking into his earnest eyes, Olivia found her reservations melting away. "Yes, I'll come to the dance with you, Sheriff Quinn." His smile was brighter than all the stars in the Wyoming sky. The days leading up to the Founders' Day celebration were filled with preparations. The whole town was involved, decorating the main street with bunting and flags, planning contests and games, organizing a community feast, and clearing the town hall for the evening dance. Olivia found herself busier than ever at the store, as everyone wanted new ribbons, fabric, and notions for their celebration outfits. In the evenings, she worked on her own dress, a creation of soft green muslin that brought out her eyes, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Lucas continued his daily visits, sometimes bringing small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry, once even a small jar of Freckle cream that he presented with a mischievous smile. "What's this?" she'd asked, turning the jar in her hands. "Something I found at the Mercantile in Cheyenne," he'd replied. "Thought you might find it amusing." Olivia had read the label. "Madame Beaumont's Freckle Fading Cream achieve the porcelain complexion of your dreams." She'd looked up at him in confusion. "You want me to fade my freckles?" "Lord, no," Lucas had laughed. "I was thinking we could use it to polish my boots, or maybe feed it to the stray cat behind the store. Anything but put it on those stars of yours." The day of the celebration dawned bright and clear. The main street of Willow Creek was transformed, with colorful banners strung between buildings and tables set up for the feast. Children ran about excitedly, men gathered to compete in various contests of strength and skill, and women laid out their best dishes for the communal meal. Olivia spent the morning helping Clara serve customers, then returned to the boarding house to prepare for the afternoon festivities. As she was pinning up her hair, a knock came at her door. "Package for you, dear," Mrs. Hawkins called. Olivia opened the door to find the landlady holding a small box tied with a green ribbon. "From the sheriff," Mrs. Hawkins said with a knowing smile. "That man is sweet on you, make no mistake." Blushing, Olivia took the box and closed the door. Inside, nestled on a bed of cotton, was a delicate silver hair comb adorned with tiny star-shaped crystals that caught the light, sending prisms dancing across the walls. A note in Lucas's strong handwriting read simply, "For my star-kissed lady." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes as she carefully placed the comb in her hair, where it gleamed against her copper tresses. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply, not just the beauty of the piece, but the way it celebrated the very feature that had caused her so much heartache. When she descended the stairs, Mrs. Hawkins clasped her hands together in delight. "Oh, my dear, you look absolutely radiant. That shade of green suits you perfectly." "Thank you," Olivia said, smoothing the skirt of her dress nervously. "I hope it's appropriate for the celebration." "It's perfect," Mrs. Hawkins assured her, "and that comb is exquisite. The sheriff has fine taste." Lucas arrived precisely at noon, handsome in a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and his best trousers. He'd polished his boots to a high shine, and his badge gleamed on his chest. When he saw Olivia, he removed his hat, his expression one of undisguised admiration. "Miss Anderson," he said softly, "you're a vision." "Thank you," she replied, touching the comb in her hair, "and thank you for this beautiful gift. It's too much, really." "It's not nearly enough," Lucas countered, offering his arm. "Shall we?" The afternoon passed in a whirl of activity. They joined in the community feast, where Lucas proudly introduced Olivia to those townspeople she hadn't yet met. They watched the contests, cheering as the blacksmith won the anvil lifting competition, and a young cowboy from a nearby ranch took the prize for sharpshooting. Throughout it all, Lucas kept Olivia at his side, his hand often resting lightly at the small of her back or holding hers as they navigated through the crowds. She was conscious of the curious looks, some approving, others less so. Veronica Palmer, resplendent in a blue dress that matched the ribbon she'd purchased, made a point of greeting them with a brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sheriff Quinn, Miss Anderson," she said coolly. "What a charming couple you make." "Thank you, Miss Palmer," Lucas replied easily. "Enjoying the festivities, as much as one can when one's dance partner has been otherwise claimed," she said with a pointed look at Olivia. I'm sure you'll have no shortage of willing partners, Lucas said diplomatically. If you'll excuse us, I promise to introduce Miss Anderson to Judge Willis. As they walked away, Olivia squeezed his arm. You handled difficult situations with remarkable grace. Part of the job, he replied with a wink. Though I'll admit, Veronica tests my patience more than most outlaws. As evening approached, lanterns were lit throughout the town, casting a golden glow over the festivities. The townspeople began making their way to the town hall where the dance would be held. The building had been transformed with evergreen boughs, ribbons, and more lanterns, creating a festive atmosphere. A small group of musicians set up on a raised platform at one end of the hall: a fiddler, a banjo player, a man with a harmonica, and another with a small accordion. They struck up a lively tune as people filed in, the women sitting along the walls while men gathered on the opposite side. Lucas led Olivia to a seat, then bent to whisper in her ear. "Save every dance for me. Everyone," she promised, her heart fluttering at his nearness. The evening began with a formal promenade, led by the mayor and his wife. Couples followed in order of prominence in the community, with Lucas and Olivia taking their place after the banker and his wife. Olivia felt Veronica's glare burning into her back as they circled the room, but she couldn't bring herself to care. Not with Lucas looking at her as if she were the only woman in the world. As the music shifted to a waltz, Lucas drew her into his arms, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. They moved together as if they'd been dancing for years, his sure steps guiding her around the floor. "You dance beautifully," Olivia commented, surprised at his grace. "My mother insisted Owen and I learn, said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a drunken buffalo." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Took lessons from the school teacher every Saturday for a year. Your mother was a wise woman. She would have liked you," Lucas said softly. "Strong, independent, beautiful inside and out." Olivia's cheeks warmed at the compliment. "I wish I could have met her." "Me too." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Olivia, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." But before he could continue, the music ended and the dancers paused to applaud the musicians. The moment was lost as people moved about, changing partners or seeking refreshments. Throughout the evening, Lucas kept his promise to claim every dance, though propriety dictated he offer one to the mayor's wife and another to Clara, who teased him mercilessly about his sudden dancing prowess. Olivia found herself partnered briefly with the doctor and the banker, both of whom were polite if not particularly warm. During a break in the dancing, Lucas brought Olivia a cup of punch and led her outside to the small porch behind the town hall. The night air was cool after the warmth of the dance floor, and the stars blazed overhead in the clear Wyoming sky. "I needed some air," Lucas explained, loosening his collar slightly, "and a moment alone with you." Olivia sipped her punch, grateful for the darkness that hid her blush. "It's been a wonderful evening." "It has." Lucas set his cup on the porch railing and turned to face her. "Olivia, I know you came to Willow Creek expecting a different life than the one you found. I know your plans were appended in the cruelest way." "Yes," she agreed softly. "But perhaps it was for the best. I can't imagine being married to a man like Edgar Thornton now. I'm grateful every day that he was fool enough to let you go." Lucas took her hands in his. "Because it gave me the chance to find you." Olivia's heart began to race. "Lucas." "I know it hasn't been long," he continued, his voice low and earnest. "Just a few months since you stepped off that stagecoach, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of my feelings for you." He reached up to touch her cheek, his fingers gently tracing the pattern of freckles there. "These stars mapped out my destiny the moment I saw you standing lost on that boardwalk. Every freckle is a star to me, Olivia, a promise of light in the darkness." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes at the beauty of his words. "No one has ever seen me the way you do. Then everyone else has been blind." Lucas leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. "May I kiss you, Olivia Anderson?" "Yes," she whispered, her heart so full she thought it might burst. His lips met hers gently at first, a question more than a demand. When she responded, sliding her hands up to his shoulders, the kiss deepened, becoming a conversation without words, a promise neither had yet spoken aloud. When they finally parted, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood so brave and proud despite your heartbreak." "I love you too," Olivia admitted, the words coming easily now that they'd been set free. "I tried not to. I was so afraid of being hurt again." "I would never hurt you," Lucas vowed. "Not willingly, not ever." The sound of the music starting up again drifted through the open windows, reminding them they weren't truly alone. "We should go back inside," Olivia said reluctantly. "People will talk." "Let them," Lucas replied with a smile. "I'm proud to be seen with you, in fact." He hesitated, then seemed to make up his mind. "Olivia, I didn't just bring you out here to kiss you, though I'm mighty glad you allowed it." He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small object that gleamed in the starlight. "I wanted to ask you a question, the most important question of my life." Olivia's breath caught as he opened his hand to reveal a ring, a delicate silver band set with a small but perfect diamond that sparkled like a star. "This was my mother's," Lucas said, his voice slightly unsteady. "She made me promise I'd only give it to a woman worthy of it, a woman I could love with my whole heart for all my days." He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "Olivia Anderson, I know we haven't known each other long, but some things a man just knows. I love everything about you, your courage, your kindness, your determination. And yes, those beautiful stars scattered across your face that led me to you." Lucas dropped to one knee on the wooden porch, still holding her hand. "Will you marry me, Olivia? Will you make Willow Creek your home and me the happiest man in the Wyoming Territory?" Tears spilled freely down Olivia's cheeks now, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she said through a watery smile. "Yes, Lucas Quinn, I will marry you." His answering smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to gather her in his arms, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. Their laughter mingled in the night air, a sound of pure happiness that needed no words. When he set her down, Olivia looked at the ring on her finger, then up at the man who had given her not just a piece of jewelry, but a future filled with love and acceptance. "It's beautiful," she said softly, "like the stars above us." "Not half as beautiful as the stars on your face," Lucas replied, kissing her once more. "My constellation, my guiding light, my love." Hand in hand, they returned to the dance floor, where Lucas proudly announced their engagement to the assembled townspeople. Clara was the first to congratulate them, followed by Mrs. Hawkins and the doctor. Others offered good wishes with varying degrees of sincerity. Veronica Palmer left the dance shortly after the announcement, her blue ribbons trailing behind her like a storm cloud. As the evening drew to a close, Lucas and Olivia shared one final waltz, moving in perfect harmony as the last notes of music filled the hall. In that moment, with his arms around her and his heart pledged to hers, Olivia knew she had found something far greater than what she'd originally sought in Willow Creek. Not just a husband or a home, but a love that truly saw her for exactly who she was. Every freckle a star, every star a blessing, every blessing a promise of the bright future that awaited them. They were married 3 weeks later in the white clapboard church at the end of Main Street. Clara stood as Olivia's witness while Dr. Owen Quinn traveled from Denver to stand beside his brother. The church was filled with townspeople, some who had come to genuinely celebrate the union, others simply curious to see the freckle-faced mail-order bride who had captured their sheriff's heart. Olivia wore a gown of her own creation, ivory satin with delicate lace she'd ordered specially from Denver. Her copper hair was adorned with the star comb Lucas had given her, along with a veil of fine tulle that did nothing to hide the freckles scattered across her face like constellations. Lucas waited for her at the altar, his eyes never leaving her as she walked down the aisle on Dr. Quinn's arm. When the minister asked who gave this woman in marriage, Owen responded clearly, "Her family, myself, and my brother." The simple ceremony was followed by a celebration in the town square, with tables laden with food contributed by nearly every household in Willow Creek. Even Edgar Thornton made an appearance, though he stayed on the periphery of the gathering, his expression unreadable as he watched the woman he had rejected dancing in the arms of her new husband. Later, Lucas noticed Thornton's presence and nodded to Olivia. "Are you bothered that he's here?" Olivia glanced over at the man who had once caused her such pain, then back to the man who had healed it. Not in the least. In fact, I'm grateful to him. Grateful? Lucas raised an eyebrow. If he hadn't been so shallow, I would never have found you. She stretched up to kiss his cheek. His rejection led me to true love. Lucas smiled, drawing her closer. Then I'm grateful to him too, though he's still a fool. A fortunate fool, Olivia corrected, for both of us. They made their home in a small house on the edge of town, close enough for Lucas to reach the sheriff's office quickly if needed, but with enough land around it to plant a garden and perhaps someday build a larger home for a growing family. Olivia continued to work at the general store, eventually buying into partnership with Clara when the older woman began considering retirement. Her dressmaking skills brought in additional income, and soon Mrs. Quinn's Fashions became known throughout the county as the place to order special occasion garments. Lucas served as sheriff for many more years, keeping the peace in a town that grew steadily as the railroad expanded westward. His fair but firm approach to law enforcement earned him the respect of even the rowdiest cowboys, and his obvious devotion to his freckle-faced wife became something of a legend in the territory. A year after their wedding, Olivia gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Margaret, after Lucas's mother. The baby girl arrived with a dusting of freckles already visible across her tiny nose, prompting Lucas to declare her another constellation in our family sky. 2 years later, a son joined the family, James, a sturdy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. Like his sister, he too sported a scattering of freckles, though fewer and fainter than Margaret's. On warm summer evenings, the Quinn family could often be found on their front porch, Lucas pointing out real stars to his children while telling them stories about the stars on their mother's face, how they had guided him to her, how they were marks of special beauty, how every freckle was more precious to him than gold. Olivia would listen to these tales with a smile, her heart full as she watched her husband transform what had once been her greatest insecurity into a magical gift in the eyes of their children. Sometimes, when the children were asleep and they sat alone on the porch, Lucas would trace the pattern of freckles across her cheeks and nose, naming constellations of his own invention. "Here's the faithful heart," he would say, connecting dots across her left cheek. "And here's the brave spirit," tracing another pattern on the right. "And this one," he would continue, outlining freckles that crossed the bridge of her nose, "is the path to happiness." "You're making those up," Olivia would laugh, leaning into his touch. "Of course I am," he would admit with a grin, "but they're no less real to me than Orion or the Big Dipper." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas presented Olivia with a locket containing a portrait of their family himself, Olivia, Margaret, James, and the newest addition, baby Rose, who had arrived just 3 months earlier. On the back, he had engraved a simple message: "Every freckle a star, every star a blessing, every blessing ours to cherish." That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Olivia traced the familiar lines of her husband's face. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. Marrying the rejected mail-order bride with too many freckles, Lucas captured her hand, bringing it to his lips to kiss her palm. "Not for a single moment. Those freckles led me to the greatest happiness of my life. They're the map that brought me home." "And you're mine," Olivia whispered, curling into his embrace. "My star, my compass, my heart." Outside their window, the Wyoming sky blazed with real stars, countless points of light in the vast darkness. But within the walls of the Quinn home, the most precious constellation was the one that had brought a lonely sheriff and a rejected bride together, the pattern of freckles that had transformed from marks of shame to symbols of the most profound love. Years passed, and Willow Creek grew from a small frontier town into a proper community with a school, a proper doctor's office, occasionally visited by Dr. Owen Quinn, who never failed to tease his brother about the stars that had guided him to happiness, and even a small library that Lucas helped establish, donating his beloved poetry books as the first collection. The Quinn children grew to Margaret becoming a teacher with her mother's copper hair and creative spirit, James following in his uncle's footsteps to study medicine, and little Rose showing signs of her father's sense of justice and her mother's determination. When Lucas finally retired as sheriff after 20 years of service, the town honored him with a celebration nearly as grand as Founders Day. In his speech, he thanked the people of Willow Creek for their trust and support, but reserved his most heartfelt gratitude for the woman whose constellation of freckles guided me home each night. There were still those who remembered the story of how they met the mail-order bride rejected for her freckles, the sheriff who saw stars where others saw flaws. It became something of a town legend, told and retold, growing more romantic with each telling until it achieved the status of a frontier fairy tale. Edgar Thornton never married, eventually losing his ranch to gambling debts and moving further west. Veronica Palmer wed a banker from Cheyenne and left Willow Creek, though she returned occasionally to visit family, her gaze still lingering on Lucas with something like regret. But for Lucas and Olivia Quinn, life unfolded as a series of shared joys and challenges met together. There were hard years when drought threatened the county, times of illness that brought fear, moments of worry as their children grew and faced their own trials. Through it all, they remained each other's steadfast stars, guiding lights in whatever darkness came. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the old house at the edge of town, now expanded and improved, but still home. As the summer evening deepened into night, Lucas took Olivia's hand and led her to the porch swing that had been their favorite spot for decades. 30 years, he marveled, his hair now silver but his eyes still bright with the same love that had captured her heart so long ago. 30 years of counting stars. Olivia leaned against his shoulder, her own hair streaked with gray but her freckles unchanged, perhaps even more pronounced with age. The best 30 years any woman could ask for. Inside, they could hear their grandchildren laughing, the next generation of Quinns, some with freckles, some without, all treasured beyond measure. "You know," Lucas said thoughtfully, "I still remember the exact moment I fell in love with you. Standing there on the boardwalk, looking lost but so determined, the sun hitting your face just right, making those freckles glow like gold dust. And I remember thinking you were just being kind," Olivia replied with a smile, offering help to the stranded mail-order bride. "It was never kindness," Lucas corrected gently. "It was destiny, written in stars right here." He traced the familiar pattern across her cheek. "Every freckle a promise kept, every star a blessing received," Olivia finished, turning to kiss him softly. Above them, the real stars emerged one by one in the deepening twilight, eternal witnesses to a love that had begun with rejection, but blossomed into something rare and precious, a love that saw beauty where others saw flaws, that transformed marks of difference into maps of destiny. In the wild heart of Wyoming, where the land was as unforgiving as it was beautiful, Lucas and Olivia Quinn had created their own constellation, a pattern of love, family, and acceptance that would guide generations to come. And it had all begun with those freckles, those stars, and the heart wise enough to recognize their beauty. Every freckle a star, every star a blessing, every blessing a testament to the truth that real love sees with more than just the eyes, it sees with the heart, discovering constellations of beauty where others see only imperfection. And in Willow Creek, the story would be told for generations, of the mail-order bride cast away for having freckles, and the cowboy sheriff who said, "Every freckle is a star to me."